So final exam prep or preview or whatever you'd like to call it. Hey, it could be worse. It could be the cybersecurity exam. I am not encouraging you to hack the school servers. All right, so I'm going to make, I did a poll a couple weeks ago. The poll results came back very sort of inconclusive. I'm going to make 2 final exam dates available. You can take the final exam next Wednesday at 10 o'clock a.m. or next Thursday at the regular class date and time, Thursday at 5 p.m. If you want to take the class Thursday at 5, you don't need to do anything. Just show up there. If you want to take the class Wednesday at 4, please let me know, either by, let's just say by email. Please let me know by email. If for whatever reason, I know there are a few people that I talked to that were unable to make the Thursday date. If you can't make the Thursday date or the Wednesday date, also let me know by email. We'll talk about it. We'll see what we can do. Both of them will be the, okay, I have someone who's perhaps better at a calendar than I am saying that these aren't the right days. So let's see. Let's pull up the calendar. Thursday is the 6th and Wednesday is the 5th. All right. Well, Thursday is the 6th. Wednesday is the 5th. Okay. Better? We all agreed? Got the days right now? Okay, so anyway, as I was saying, if you're going to take the exam on Thursday at the normal date and time, don't need to let me know. If you're not going to take it then we need to talk. The Thursday exam will definitely use the regular Zoom meeting. We'll definitely use the Zoom meeting link. The Wednesday exam, I'm going to see if I can make it use the same link, but these recurring meetings can be hard. I might end up using a different link. If I do, it'll be posted in Piazza just like the Thursday link is. So the exam will have a time limit. I am expecting that it will be a 60-minute exam. I might decide to make it a few minutes longer, but it will not be, 2 hours or 2.5 hours. It will be 60 minutes or close to 60 minutes. So let me just say, everything that I'm going to say tonight is subject to some changes. I'm not really expecting to, but I reserve the right to tweak a few things. So consider this a prediction, a pretty good prediction. Okay, the final exam will be, and I'm not going to change this, will be just like the quizzes. Open book, open notes, open whatever you want to get to from your computer, right? No discussion with others, no help from others, same rules as the quizzes have been all semester. I need to point out that by university policy, if you have an unexcused absence on the final, by policy, that is an automatic F for the class. I would not like anyone to have an automatic F for the class. So be sure to coordinate with me beforehand. I can be fairly accommodating on taking the final, and I'd rather do something accommodating than have you get an automatic F. That would really be bad. Yes, question on the chat. Is the purpose of the Zoom link to ask questions during the exam? Yes. I don't need your cameras on. I don't expect to be watching you. It will just be, you can connect, you can tune in, you can ask questions. Everybody can hear the answer to the question, just like in class. Just like as if we were in class. So everyone has a chance to benefit from your question. The exam will be a Blackboard exam, just like the quizzes have been. So what's the final exam going to look like? This shouldn't be too much of a surprise. It's going to have 5 sections. Those 5 sections, I am anticipating to have 20 points each. I may tweak that a little bit, but that's what I'm thinking right now. The 5 sections are going to be one section of short answers. Those short answers will cover potentially everything across, over the course of the semester. Then there will be a section on input space coverage, and a section on graph coverage, and a section on logic coverage, and a section on syntax coverage. So no big surprises here. We're going to cover the 4 major things on this, this chart that we've been showing all semester. There will also be a bonus question. Yay, everybody loves bonus questions. As I said, I'm anticipating 60 minutes to complete the exam. What I've done before and what I'm likely to do this time is basically set up about a 5-minute period during which you can start the exam, right, where you can open the Blackboard test. So, I'll say, okay, test is ready, and if you need to grab yourself a quick drink or something before you start, that's fine. But you'll have probably a 5-minute period in which to start the test, and you will get 60 minutes from the point at which you start the test. So let's take a little bit of a deeper look on each of those 5 sections. So section 1, short answers, probably going to be 10 questions, and it can be taken from all of the topics we've talked about, right? So the things we had at the beginning of the semester about agile testing, basic definitions like what's a fault, what's a failure, what's an error, the Ripper model, infection propagation, those things are very likely to be questions on there. There will be short questions, or there may be short questions drawn from each of the other 4 things, right? Input space coverage, graph coverage, logic coverage, syntax coverage. These are going to be some combination of, multiple choice, true, false, fill in the blank, select the best answer, things like that. So relatively small, relatively quick. The input space coverage, there will be one problem. That problem may have multi-parts to it, depending on what I exactly decide to do. And it could contain things like develop a set of characteristics, given some information, identify and fix incomplete or non-disjoint partitions, identify test requirements for things like base choice or all choice or pairwise test criteria. You might be asked to identify and come up with replacements for infeasible test requirements. You will probably not be asked to do all of these things, because doing all of those things is kind of approaching a 60-minute test on its own, right? I mean, we were doing 30 to 45-minute quizzes where I would expect you to do all those things. Obviously, we're not going to do that level of topic for each of these things and try to squeeze it into an hour. So you're not going to have to do all of those things, but you might have to do any of those things. The section on graph coverage, again, very similar. Be one question. That question might have multiple parts, 20 points in total. You might have to draw the graph from a set of nodes or from a small source code listing. Or you might have to choose from a set of provided graphs which one is the graph that matches, which is basically the same thing, because you kind of have to draw it and then look at it and figure out which one matches. You might need to find test requirements to satisfy node coverage, edge pair coverage, prime path coverage, DU pair or DU path coverage. Again, not all of those, but possibly any one of them. You should be prepared to identify whether things are prime paths or not. You should be prepared to identify whether things are test paths or not. We're not going to include chapter 7.4.7 and 7 through 7.6. And in fact, I don't think I even need this in here anymore, because I don't even think that we went over the slides for that. I think we really just focused on the earlier part of chapter 7. Logic coverage, guess what? One question, maybe multi-parts, 20 points. What should you be prepared to do? You should be prepared to build truth tables. You should be prepared to identify when a clause determines the predicate, and you should be prepared to do that either by the XOR approach or by the examining the truth table approach. You want to be able to build Carnot maps from predicates. You want to be able to use them to identify prime implicants, right, to simplify your predicate. You want to be able to identify test requirements to satisfy GAC, CAC, or RAC. And I will not include in this problem inactive clause coverage or MUTP, CUTP, and FP, all these more complicated things. There may be questions about them on the short answer section. They may appear in the bonus area, but they will not appear as part of this main 20-point logic question. And there will also be a syntax coverage question. Again, might be multi-part, probably going to be worth 20 points unless I decide to, juggle the amount of credit for each of these sections. So topics here, you might need to apply mutation operators to create mutants. Be sure, as I've said a couple of times, be sure to carefully read the definition of the mutation operator that I give you so that you're doing the right work. I am not going to give you a mutation operator that is going to result in, 30 mutants. I'm going to give you something that's scoped to some reasonable number, right? Probably single digit or close to that. I'm not going to be asking you to generate a whole bunch of mutants. Understand the difference between strong and weak mutation. Be able to identify mutants that are killable or that are equivalent or that are trivial. I'm not going to ask you to identify dominator mutants, and because the notion of productive mutants is still such a fuzzy notion, I'm not going to ask you to identify whether mutants are productive or not. I may very well ask you to write a test, or more specifically, when I say test, I really just mean an assertion or whatever else is needed with the assertion, right? I don't need the whole syntax of what a JUnit test looks like. I'll just be looking for an assertion that you can put some data into this that should pass on the original and fail on the mutant. We are only going to be talking about source code mutation testing. So BNF and other topics out of Chapter 9, they are not going to appear here. So the things that we have been doing on quizzes and the things that we have been doing in class exercises, those are the kinds of things you should expect to see here. Last of all, there will be a bonus section. The bonus will probably have one question. It might end up having 2 related questions. It will be worth 5 points in total. Topics on here might include things like unique true points, near false points, inactive clause coverage, some more complex topics of mutation testing, like about whether mutants subsume each other. This is a place where dominator mutants might kind of come into the mix. I might ask you to compare and contrast coverage criteria from different categories. So what's the relationship between edge pair testing and pairwise input space testing, for example? I'm just kind of making that up off the top of my head. I'm not sure that I could answer that off the top of my head. But things like that, right? So these are going to be more advanced topics that are going to give you an opportunity to demonstrate a more in-depth mastery of the topic, and that's why they're bonus questions. All right, so a little bit about test strategy. So, you're all in a graduate program. I mean, you've been spending a lot of time taking tests. I'm sure you've got your own test taking strategies. I'm not going to tell you to do anything, different than what you're accustomed to doing. But I'll share a couple of mine. And one that I like is, if you run into a question and you can't answer it immediately, move on, right? Don't get hung up. Don't spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes on a 10-point problem that makes it hard for you to complete 2 or 3 other 10-point problems. The other thing I find is that I sometimes learn things. If I don't know the answer to that, I'm going to skip forward. And then in some later question, I'll be like, oh yeah, that reminds me of the answer to that one. So you might want to consider skipping over things you can't immediately answer. Knock off what you think are the fast, easy ones first, so that you get the most points on the board fast, so that you don't lose a lot of time struggling with something that you're having a hard time answering. If you've got other techniques, you know, fine. Use whatever techniques you like. All right, so that's it for the final exam briefing. Any questions or discussion here? There's always questions about the final exam.
I just have a really quick question. I noticed on some of your exams or tests, there are check boxes. Apparently, some of those are multiple options. Like I can check more than one box. On your exams, are they just one choice options or are they multiple checkbox solutions?
That's a great question. And in the past, I have set up some things that I intended to be single choice solutions that people ended up being able to check multiple boxes on. So I tell you what, I will do a double check and go through, and I will make sure that the question clearly states whether you're picking one answer or multiple answers.
Okay, thank you.
So let me make myself a note on that.
Thank you.
Yep, so fair question. I will change the questions if they aren't already to say things like pick the best answer or pick all the answers that apply.
Thank you, Professor.
All right, any other final exam questions? All right, well, you know, like I said, in a lot of ways, the final exam is going to look a lot like the quizzes. As you can imagine, it won't be as in-depth because we've got 60 minutes to cover, you know, 13 weeks worth of stuff instead of 30 or 40 minutes to cover 1 week's worth of stuff. So obviously there's going to be some time optimizations in there that will help you get through that in 60 minutes. So it's not going to be a collection of, you know, your worst 10 quizzes all strung together in an hour. But time management will be important. So it is a, you know, it will be a relatively short test. And so you do want to make sure you're making good use of your time.